I have not read your first two books, which are about value investing, fairly specifically investing. And I'm only a new subscriber to your email list, but I did read this book, Soul in the Game. I believe the term comes from Taleb's term, Soul in the Game, which I adore, and I find myself using it quite often because, as David said earlier, I have a creative side like you do with writing. I'm not as good as a writer as you, but I'm pretty handy with the camera. But I find I'm curious. You mentioned Taleb once in this book, and I maybe twice. I have a sneaking suspicion that you mentioned him another time. But is that on purpose, or did you speak a lot about the Stoics? You speak a lot about you mentioned Dostoevsky, who I love. You mentioned Buffett a lot, but very little Taleb. Why is this?
Oh, I don't. I think I actually mentioned it quite a few times for considering I'm writing a non-finance book. In fact, when I talk about Soul in the Game, I mentioned that the idea, like the term came from Taleb. It's I give him credit for that. I think actually, just think about it. I'm writing a book that has nothing to do with finance, and we can do Control F and how many times I mentioned it. Probably maybe more than a few times. And I have a tremendous respect for Nassim. He's a absolutely incredible thinker, and I have I'm 49 years old, and I was introduced to him on my 30th birthday because a friend of mine gave me his first book, Fooled by Random. No, well, actually, I guess it would be second book. It's Fooled by Randomness. When I was 30 years old, and it's kind of interesting. The dynamic hedging. His editor was Pamela van Giesen, who is the same editor who I had for my first two Wiley books. So and in fact, Nassim was I was at the time I was negotiating with Wiley, and he said, "Do you want me to negotiate for you?" I'm like, "No, thank you, but thank you." So he was very kind about that. But anyway, I think so. The Soul in the Game concept is absolutely incredible. And so when I read Skin in the Game, that's where the concept came from, and I was reading the Skin in the Game. It's a great book, and I stumbled on this chapter, which I have to ask Nassim if this, if he had to rate how important the chapter was for him. It sounded to me like it was almost like a throwaway chapter for him. To me, that was probably the most important chapter in the book. And it seems like the same for you guys, right?
Yeah, he's got a chart in that book about people with no skin in the game, people with skin in the game, and then people with soul in the game, artisans, creators, and this and that. And I remember I was listening to it on audiobook. It was my first Taleb book. I'd stumbled across it. And I was like, man, this guy's grumpy, but he's really smart. That was my first impression, right? and it's on audiobook, and it's it's going on my speaker in the house. And my girlfriend at the time, she's listening, and he's doing on the audio. It just does this thing: so and so skin in the game, so and so no skin in the game, so and so soul in the game. And he does this chart for a while, and I remember it really sunk into me that piece, and yeah, it stuck with me for a long time. And then I immediately read all four other books. So you, on page 158, you have a friend that you say he's an incredible thinker, but sometimes he teaches you how not to behave, because when he gets somebody in his sights, he is ruthless about, he's ruthless, in condemning them. Is there any correlation to our friend? Cause he's pretty severe on Twitter, to say the least.
I prefer not to answer that question.
Fair enough. Okay.
Trying to get people in trouble, Alex. I'm gonna talk about something I read this morning's chapter that so I'm bad at this. I don't know how familiar you are with the disc profile personality thing, but I'm like a 99I. I very much am the type of personality who wants people to like me, and it's, trying to work through it. It's not an easy thing to deal with a lot of times. And so your chapter today that I was reading, actually not today, it's like a week ago, but was the where you vocalize internal, external, when you think through like emotional, the stoicism piece. And like I know that, right? I know things that are in your control, out of your control, internal disruptors, external disruptors. But the fact that you vocalize it or tell yourself like, oh, this is an external thing, I can't control this, is I was like, wow, that's actually like, that's such a simple and subtle difference. And so I'm gonna start doing that. I was like, wow, that makes, yeah. So I don't know. I'll let you know how it works for me. But I'm excited to start giving that a shot, because I was like, that's such a simple little trick to just go, nope. This is. Don't worry about that.
Dave, so let me just make this point. So Stoic philosophy, I would probably, like, I think maybe a more appropriate name would be Stoic Practice. Because with like I look at Stoic, let's call it Stoic Practice for now, as basically an operating system for life. And when you try to practice this, you're trying to rewrite the programming you've been programmed for decades, and you're trying to rewrite it. And therefore there's an Asian proverb, knowing and not doing is not knowing. Knowing and not doing is not knowing. So you're reading the book, but not practicing it. Like, you're reading about Stoic philosophy, but not doing anything about it. You might as well not know it, right? So I would argue that it's just you have to practice every day, and you're going to fail a lot. But every time you fail, you try to learn from it, get up, and keep going, which is, I'm sure that's probably very similar to what you guys training you got in military. So that's probably very similar to that.